Richard Hayes sat alone in his huge office on the top floor of the Hayes Tower. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled as the sun went down. He looked at the framed photo on his desk. It showed a beautiful woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. Laura, his wife. Gone for 10 years now. Richard touched the photo lightly with his fingertips. "Another day without you," he whispered. He was 50 years old now, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. His face showed the lines of a man who rarely smiled anymore. 10 years ago, Richard had it all. He was already very rich from his tech company. He had a loving wife who filled his days with joy and music. Then came the accident. A rainy night, a drunk driver, and Laura was gone forever. After that, Richard became a different man. He worked all the time. He built his company into one of the biggest in the world. His wealth grew until he became a billionaire many times over, but the emptiness inside him never went away. "Mr. Hayes?" His assistant Penny stood at the door. "Your dinner meeting starts in an hour. Frank called in sick, so he can't drive you tonight." Richard frowned. He didn't like change in his routine. "Call a car service." "I tried, sir. There's a big event downtown. No cars available for at least 2 hours." Richard sighed and stood up. "Fine, I'll drive myself." He couldn't miss this meeting. It was with investors from Japan who could help his company grow even bigger in Asia. He took the private elevator down to the parking garage where his black luxury car waited. Richard rarely drove himself anymore. He had people to do that for him, but he still remembered how. The dinner meeting went well. The Japanese investors agreed to put millions into his new project. Richard should have felt happy about this win. Instead, he just felt tired as he drove home late that night. Dark clouds filled the sky. Soon, heavy rain began to fall. Richard turned on his wipers to the highest setting, but he still could barely see the road. Then his engine made a strange noise. The car began to slow down. "No, not now," Richard said as warning lights flashed on his dashboard. The car rolled to a stop on the side of a road he didn't know well. This wasn't his usual route home, but he had taken a detour to avoid traffic. Richard called his assistant. "Penny, my car broke down. I need help." "I'll send someone right away, Mr. Hayes, but with this storm it might take an hour or more." Richard looked out his window. Through the rain, he saw a small diner across the street. A neon sign flickered. Melody's Place. Light glowed from its windows. "I'll wait at a diner nearby," he told Penny. "Let me know when help is coming." He ended the call, put up his coat collar, and ran through the rain to the diner. A bell jingled as Richard opened the door. Warm air hit his face. The diner was small but clean, with red booths and a counter with stools. Only a few people sat, inside, talking quietly. The smell of coffee and pie filled the air. Richard chose a booth in the corner, far from the other customers. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He just needed a place to wait. He took off his wet coat and sat down. A young woman approached his table. She wore a simple blue uniform with a white apron. Her name tag said Abby. She had brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Welcome to Melody's Place," she said. "Nasty night to be out, isn't it?" Richard nodded but didn't smile back. "Just coffee, please, black." If his coldness bothered her, Abby didn't show it. "Coming right up." She walked away to get his coffee. Richard checked his phone. No message from Penny yet. He looked around the diner. It was nothing like the fancy restaurants he usually visited. Everything here was simple and a bit worn down. Yet there was something comfortable about it. Abby returned with his coffee. "Here you go. Can I get you anything else? Our apple pie is fresh today." "No, thank you." Richard's tone made it clear he didn't want to talk. Abby nodded and moved to help other customers. Richard sipped his coffee and watched the rain hit the windows. His phone buzzed. A message from Penny. "Tow truck delayed due to accidents on the highway, at least 90 minutes. Sorry, sir." Richard frowned. Another hour and a half in this place. He took another sip of coffee and opened his email on his phone. He might as well work while he waited. The diner grew quieter as customers left. Only Richard and an old man at the counter remained. Abby moved around the diner, cleaning tables and putting things away. As she worked, she began to hum softly. At first, Richard didn't notice. He was focused on his emails. But slowly, the melody reached him. His fingers stopped moving on his phone. His heart seemed to stop too. That tune. He looked up at Abby. She was wiping a table nearby, still humming that song. Richard knew that melody. He knew every note, every rise and fall. It was Laura's song. Laura used to sing it every night before they went to sleep. It was a lullaby her grandmother had taught her, passed down through generations in her family. Laura had told him it was special, known only to her family. A secret melody that belonged just to them. Yet here was this waitress humming the exact same tune. Not just similar, identical. Even the small changes Laura had added were there. Richard's coffee cup slipped from his hand and clattered on the table. Coffee spilled onto the floor. Abby rushed over with a cloth. "Oh, I'm so sorry if I startled you." Richard couldn't speak. He just stared at her face. She looked nothing like Laura. Yet that song... "Sir, are you okay?" Abby asked, concern in her eyes as she cleaned up the spill. Richard found his voice. "That song, the one you were humming. What is it?" Abby seemed surprised by the question. "Oh, just an old family song. My grandmother taught it to me when I was little." She smiled softly. She said it had been in our family for generations. I sing it to my daughter every night. Richard felt like he couldn't breathe. "Where did your family come from?" "Originally, Abby gave him a curious look, probably wondering why the stranger cared. "A small coastal town called Pine Haven way back. Though my branch of the family moved inland about 100 years ago." "Why do you ask?" Richard's hands began to shake. "Pine Haven, the same town where Laura's family had roots. I just thought I recognized the melody," he said. Abby smiled. "That would be strange. My grandmother always said our family song was unique to us. She'd be shocked if someone else knew it." She finished cleaning and stood up. "Would you like another coffee?" Richard nodded, unable to speak again. As Abby walked away, his mind raced. How was this possible? Was it just an incredible coincidence? Or was there some connection he didn't understand? His phone buzzed again. Penny. Tow truck arriving in 15 minutes. Richard should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt a strange panic. He wasn't ready to leave. He needed to know more about Abby and her song, Laura's song. When Abby brought his fresh coffee, Richard tried to seem casual. "Do you work here every day?" "Most days," she answered. "Evenings during the week and morning shift on weekends." She smiled. "I'm saving up to open a small music school someday. It's a slow process, but I'll get there." Music, just like Laura, who had studied music before they got married. The bell above the door jingled. A man in a tow truck uniform walked, shaking rain from his coat. "I'm looking for a Mr. Hayes. Got a call about a broken-down luxury car." Abby looked at Richard with surprise. "I guess that's you?" Richard nodded and stood up. He left money on the table, far more than needed for the coffee. "Thank you," he said to Abby. He wanted to say more, to ask more, but the words wouldn't come. As he followed the tow truck driver out into the rain, Richard looked back. Through the window, he could see Abby collecting his cup. She had started humming again. For the first time in 10 years, Richard felt something crack in the wall he had built around his heart. He knew, without a doubt, that he would return to Melody's place. He had to hear that song again. For 3 days, Richard could not stop thinking about the waitress and her song. He sat through meetings without hearing a word. He stared at reports without reading them. All he could hear was that melody in his head. "Sir, are you listening?" his assistant Penny asked during a budget meeting. Richard blinked and looked around the conference room. 10 people were staring at him, waiting. "I'm sorry," he said. Continue. But his mind drifted away again. That evening, Richard canceled his dinner plans. He told his driver to take the night off. Then he got in his car and drove back to Melody's place. He parked across the street and watched the diner for a while. Through the windows, he could see Abby moving between tables, serving food with a smile. Finally, Richard got out of his car and walked inside. The same bell jingled above the door. A few more customers filled the diner tonight. Richard chose the same corner booth as before. Abby approached with a menu. When she saw him, her eyes widened with recognition. "Well, hello again," she said. "Car trouble again, or did you come back for our famous pie this time?" Richard tried to smile, but it felt strange on his face. "The coffee was good." Abby laughed. "High praise indeed. What can I get you tonight?" "Coffee and—" Richard glanced at the menu. "What do you recommend?" "Our meatloaf is the best in town. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans." "That sounds fine," Richard said. As Abby walked away, Richard noticed how she greeted every customer by name. She asked an old man about his wife's health and helped a mother quiet her crying baby. People clearly liked her. When she brought his coffee, Richard gathered his courage. "The song you were humming the other night. Could you tell me more about it?" Abby set down his cup. "You're really curious about that old tune, aren't you? Like I said, it's just a family song. My grandmother called it The River's Promise. She said our family has sung it for generations. Could you sing it?" Richard asked. "The whole song, I mean." Abby looked surprised. "Right now, I don't really sing for customers." "Please," Richard said. "It reminds me of something important." Abby studied his face. Something in his eyes must have touched her, because she nodded slowly. "Not right now while I'm working, but maybe before you leave, if it's quiet." Richard ate his meal slowly. The food was simple but good. He watched as customers came and went. All the while he was waiting, hoping to hear the song again. Near closing time, only Richard remained in the diner. An older man emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Abby, I'm heading out," he called. "Don't forget to lock up." "I will, Joe. See you tomorrow." After Joe left, Abby began cleaning tables. Richard watched her, not knowing what to say. "You're still hoping to hear that song, aren't you?" Abby asked without looking up. "Yes," Richard admitted. Abby finished wiping a table, then sat down in the booth across from Richard. "You know, most billionaires don't eat alone in diners or ask waitresses to sing for them." Richard stiffened. "You know who I am? I looked you up after you left such a big tip. Richard Hayes, tech billionaire." She smiled. "Don't worry, I won't. Tell anyone you eat meatloaf with regular folks." Richard relaxed a little. "The song means a lot to me." Abby nodded. "Okay then." She took a deep breath and began to sing. The melody filled the empty diner. Her voice was clear and sweet, not trained, but natural. And the words, they were exactly as Laura had sung them. Every verse, every line, the same. The song told a story of lovers separated by a river, promising to find each other again. It spoke of stars guiding the way home and love lasting beyond time. When Abby finished, Richard sat very still. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. "That's beautiful," he managed to say. "Thank you," Abby said. "Now, will you tell me why it matters so much to you?" Richard looked down at his empty coffee cup. "My wife used to sing it, before she died." Abby's face softened with understanding. "I'm so sorry, but how did she know our family song?" "That's what I don't understand," Richard said. "Laura said it was her family's song, passed down through generations, just like your grandmother told you." Abby frowned. "That's so strange. Was your wife from Pine Haven too?" "Her great-grandparents were. They moved away in the early 1900s. "Huh," Abby said, thinking. "Maybe our families knew each other back then, small town and all." "Maybe," Richard agreed, but he felt there was more to it. Abby glanced at the clock. "I need to close up now." Richard stood. Of course. Thank you for singing. He put money on the table and another large tip. You don't need to do that, Abby said. Please take it. Outside, Richard walked to his car but didn't get in. He looked back at the diner. Through the window, he could see Abby turning off lights. On impulse, he walked back and knocked on the door. Abby opened it with a questioning look. I'd like to hear more about your family, Richard said. About Pine Haven. About the song. Could we meet sometime when you're not working? Abby hesitated. Mr. Hayes. Richard, please. Richard. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm just a waitress. You're... She gestured vaguely, meaning his wealth, his position. Just a person who wants to understand something important, Richard said. Please. Abby thought for a moment. I have a daughter. I pick her up from school at 3 tomorrow, then we go to the park if weather's good. Madison Square Park by the fountain. If you want to talk, you can find us there. Thank you, Richard said. I'll be there. The next day, for the first time in years, Richard cleared his afternoon schedule. His executive team was shocked. Reschedule everything, he told Penny. Something important came up. At 3:30, Richard walked through Madison Square Park. He spotted Abby sitting on a bench near the fountain. Beside her was a small girl, about 8 years old, with the same brown hair and kind eyes. Richard approached slowly, suddenly, nervous. Abby saw him and waved. Richard, this is my daughter, Lily, Abby said. Lily, this is Mr. Hayes. He's interested in our family song. Lily looked up at Richard with curious eyes. Mommy sings it to me every night. Do you know it too? Richard nodded. Someone I loved very much used to sing it to me. Lily. Why don't you go play for a little while? Abby suggested. Stay where I can see you. As Lily ran to the playground, Abby turned to Richard. I brought something to show you. She pulled a small old photo album from her bag. These are some family pictures from Pine Haven. My grandmother gave me this album before she died. Richard sat beside her as she opened the album. The photos were old and faded, showing people in early 1900s clothing. Abby pointed to one photo, of a young woman standing by a river. That's my great-great-grandmother, Mary Miller. She's the one who first taught our family song to her children, according to my grandmother. Richard stared at the photo. The woman wore a long dress and had her hair up in the style of that time. There was something familiar about her face. Do you have any photos of your wife's family from Pine Haven? Abby asked. Richard shook his head. Laura had a few, but they were lost in a move before we married. She always regretted that. They talked for an hour as Lily played. Abby told Richard about growing up with her grandmother after her parents died in a car crash. She spoke about her dream to open a music school for children who couldn't afford lessons. Music helped me through the hardest times, she said. I want to give that to other kids. Richard thought of Laura, who had the same passion for music. Your daughter seems wonderful, Richard said, watching Lily on the swings. Abby smiled proudly. She is. She's been through a lot. She has a heart condition. The medical bills. She stopped herself. Sorry. You don't need to hear about that. No, please, Richard said. Tell me. Before Abby could continue, Lily ran up to them. Mommy, can I have an ice cream? Abby checked her watch. We need to go soon, sweetie. I have to get to work. You work tonight too? Richard asked. I have 2 jobs, Abby explained. The diner evenings and I clean offices in the mornings. That's why we only have afternoons together. She stood up. We should go. Can I see you again? Richard asked. There's still so much I want to know. Abby looked uncertain. I'm at the diner most evenings. I'll come by tomorrow, Richard promised. As he watched Abby and Lily walk away, Richard felt more alive than he had in 10 years. The song had led him to them, and he couldn't help feeling that somehow Laura had guided him here. For the next 2 weeks, Richard visited Melody's place almost every evening. He always sat in the same corner booth. He always ordered the same coffee. And he always waited until closing time to talk with Abby. The other customers began to notice. the well-dressed man who came just to talk to Abby. They whispered and wondered, but Abby just smiled and said he was an old family friend. One night after the diner closed, Richard and Abby sat across from each other in his usual booth. "Tell me more about Lily," Richard said. Abby's face lit up the way it always did when she talked about her daughter. "She's so brave. She was born with a heart problem. The doctors fixed it when she was a baby, but she needs another surgery soon." Her smile faded. "I've been saving for it, but it's hard." "What about her father?" Richard asked. "He left when I told him I was pregnant," Abby said. "I haven't seen him since." Richard felt angry at this unknown man who had abandoned his family. "I'm sorry." Abby shrugged. "It's just Lily and me. We manage." She changed the subject. "Have you found out anything more about our families in the song?" Richard had been researching the connection between Laura's family and Abby's. "I found some old records from Pine Haven. There was a big flood in 1910. Many people lost their homes. Families split up, moved to different places. My grandmother mentioned that flood," Abby said. "That's when part of our family moved away. Laura's family left around that same time," Richard said. "I wonder if our families knew each other back then. Maybe they shared the song." "Maybe," Abby said. She glanced at the clock. "I should go. The babysitter can only stay until 11. Richard nodded and stood up. "I'll walk you to your car." Outside, the night was clear and cool. Abby's old car sat alone in the parking lot. "Richard," Abby said, suddenly, "why are you really doing this? Coming here every night asking about my family, about the song?" Richard looked up at the stars. "When Laura died, something in me died too. I built walls around myself. I focused only on making money, growing my company. Nothing else mattered." He looked at Abby. "Then I heard you singing her song. Our song. It broke through those walls." "I'm not Laura," Abby said softly. "I know that," Richard said. "But meeting you, hearing that song again, it reminded me that life goes on, that maybe I can too." Abby touched his arm gently. "I'm glad then." After Abby drove away, Richard sat in his car for a long time, thinking. The next morning, Richard called his lawyer. "I want to set up a special medical fund," anonymously. Later that day, Abby received a call from Lily's doctor. "Ms. Miller, good news. A private medical foundation has selected Lily for their program. All her medical expenses will be covered. The surgery can happen next month." Abby was shocked. "What foundation? I didn't apply for anything." "The Hayes Foundation for Children's Health," the doctor said. "They choose a few special cases each year." Abby immediately knew who was behind this. That evening when Richard came to the diner, she waited until they were alone after closing. "You paid for Lily's surgery," she said. It wasn't a question. Richard looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to help." "Why? You barely know us." "I know enough," Richard said. "I know you work 2 jobs to support your daughter. I know you're saving for a music school while paying medical bills. I know you sing the same song my wife sang." He paused. "And I know that for the first time in 10 years, I look forward to each day because I might see you." Abby didn't know what to say. "Richard, I'm grateful for your help with Lily's surgery, but I'm not sure what you want from me." "Just your friendship," Richard said. "For now." Abby nodded slowly. "I can give you that." The next few weeks brought big changes. Lily had her surgery and recovered quickly. Richard visited her in the hospital, bringing a stuffed bear almost as big as she was. Lily loved Richard's visits. She didn't care that he was rich or famous. She just liked that he listened to her stories and never talked to her like she was sick. One day, Richard invited Abby and Lily to his home. His driver picked them up in a fancy car with dark windows. "Wow," Lily said as they drove through the gates of Richard's estate. "Is this a castle?" Richard laughed. "Just a house. A big one." The house stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Gardens surrounded it with paths winding between flowers and trees. Inside, Richard seemed nervous as he showed them around. I haven't had many visitors in recent years, he admitted. The house was beautiful, but felt empty somehow. No family photos, no personal touches, just expensive furniture and art. Then Richard led them to a room at the end of a long hallway. He hesitated before opening the door. This was Laura's music room. I haven't been in here much since she died. The room was filled with sunlight from big windows facing the sea. A grand piano stood in the center. Shelves held books and old records. A violin case rested on a small table. It's beautiful, Abby said. Richard walked to a cabinet and opened a drawer. He took out a small wooden box. I found this last week. I had forgotten about it. He opened the box and took out a yellowed piece of paper. It's a letter Laura's grandmother wrote to her mother. Listen to this part. I still sing our river song to the children every night, just as my dear friend Mary taught me before we left. Pine Haven, Abby gasped. Mary? That was my great-great-grandmother's name. Mary Miller. Richard nodded. I think our families were friends, not relatives. The song didn't split between family branches. It was shared between friends, but both families came to think of it as their own over the years. So the song connects us, Abby said softly. Yes, Richard agreed. Just like it connected Laura's family and yours all those years ago. Lily had wandered to the piano. She pressed a key and a clear note rang out. Can anyone play this? She asked. I'm afraid not, Richard said. Laura played, but I never learned. Mom can play, Lily said proudly. She's really good. Richard looked at Abby with surprise. You play piano? Abby looked embarrassed. A little. I studied music in college before Lily was born, before I had to drop out to work. Would you play something? Richard asked. Abby sat down at the piano hesitantly. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she began to play. The melody of their shared song filled the room, but it was fuller now, with chords and gentle variations that made it even more beautiful. Richard closed his eyes. He could almost feel Laura in the room with them, listening too. When Abby finished playing, there were tears in her eyes. Thank you for sharing this room with us, she said. Richard knew then that the song had brought these two families together twice. Once in the past, and now again. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in 10 years he was ready to find out. That night, after taking Abby and Lily home, Richard got a call from Greg, his oldest friend and business partner. Richard, we need to talk, Greg said. The board is concerned. You've been missing meetings, changing your schedule. What's going on? I've met someone, Richard said simply. A woman? Greg sounded surprised. A family, Richard corrected, and a song that has changed everything. The next day, Greg came to Richard's office. Greg had been Richard's friend since college. He helped build the company from the beginning. He knew the old Richard before Laura died, and he had watched his friend change into a cold, lonely man, focused only on work. So tell me about this woman, Greg said, sitting across from Richard's desk. Her name is Abby Miller, Richard said. She works at a diner. She has a daughter named Lily. Greg frowned. A waitress? Richard, are you sure about this? There are people who would take advantage of someone in your position. Richard shook his head. It's not like that. Abby isn't after my money. You just paid for her daughter's surgery, Greg pointed out. That was my choice, Richard said. She didn't ask for it. Greg sighed. The board is worried. The business, news sites are starting to notice your absences. There are rumors. I don't care about rumors, Richard said. You should, Greg insisted. The company stock dropped 3 points yesterday after a photo of you at that diner appeared online. Richard hadn't known about any photo. Who took it? Someone with a phone camera. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're Richard Hayes, one of the richest men in the country. People notice what you do. Richard stood and walked to the window. For 10 years, I've given everything to this company. I've made everyone a lot of money. Don't I deserve some happiness? Of course you do, Greg said more gently. But be careful. Make sure this woman is who you think she is. After Greg left, Richard sat thinking, was he being foolish? He barely knew Abby. Yet he felt connected to her through the song, through their shared history. That evening, Richard didn't go to the diner. Instead, he had his assistant make some calls. By morning, a report sat on his desk. It contained everything about Abby Miller, her childhood in a small town, her college years studying music, her struggle as a single mother, her 2 jobs, her dream of opening a music school. Nothing in the report suggested Abby was anything but exactly who she seemed to be. Richard felt guilty for checking on her. He decided to go to the diner that night and tell her everything, about the photo online, about his feelings, about his hopes. But when Richard arrived at Melody's place, something was wrong. A local news van was parked outside. Through the window, he could see a reporter talking to Abby, a camera pointed at her face. Richard entered the diner. All eyes turned to him. The reporter spun around. "Mr. Hayes, perfect timing. We're just interviewing Ms. Miller about your relationship." Abby looked upset. "Richard, I didn't call them. They just showed up." The reporter pushed a microphone toward Richard. "Mr. Hayes, is it true you've been visiting this diner every night to see Ms. Miller? Is this a romantic relationship?" Richard looked at the other customers watching, at Joe the cook peering from the kitchen, at Abby's embarrassed face. "Ms. Miller is a friend," Richard said firmly. "Now please leave. You're disturbing the customers." "But Mr. Hayes..." "Leave," Richard repeated, "or I'll have my lawyers contact your station." The reporter hesitated, then signaled to the camera operator. They packed up their equipment and left. But Richard knew this was just the beginning. After the diner closed, Abby was quiet as they sat in their usual booth. "I'm sorry about that," Richard said. "It's not your fault," Abby replied. "But Richard, I don't want this attention. I don't want Lily exposed to this." "I understand," Richard said. "Maybe we should be more careful. Meet somewhere more private." Abby shook her head. "No, I think we need to take a step back. This is all happening too fast." Richard felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Abby, I'm grateful for everything you've done," she continued. "But my life was simple before I met you. Now there are reporters asking about us. People at my other job are talking. It's too much." "What are you saying?" Richard asked, though he already knew. "I think we should stop seeing each other for a while," Abby said softly. "Give things a chance to calm down." Richard wanted to argue, to convince her they could work it out. But he saw the determination in her eyes. "If that's what you want," he said. "It is," Abby replied. "For now." Richard drove home feeling numb. He had just found something worth living for again, and now it was slipping away. The next morning, more news stories appeared. Billionaire Richard Hayes and diner waitress. Love story or charity case, read one headline. Another asked, "Who is Abby Miller, the woman who captured the heart of America's most eligible widower?" Richard's phone rang. It was Abby, and she sounded upset. "There are reporters outside my apartment," she said. "Lily is scared. They're asking her questions on her way to school." Richard felt sick. "I'll fix this. Pack some things for you and... Lily, my driver will pick you up in 30 minutes. Use the back door of your building." "Where are we going?" Abby asked. "Somewhere safe," Richard promised. An hour later, Abby and Lily arrived at Richard's beach house, a smaller home he owned, on a private stretch of coastline. It was secluded, protected by high walls and security gates. "You can stay here until things calm down," Richard told them. "No one will bother you." Lily ran to the window to look at the ocean. "Mom, can we go to the beach?" Abby smiled tiredly. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetie." When Lily was exploring another room, Abby turned to Richard. "Thank you for this, but it doesn't change what I said last night." "I know," Richard said. "I just want you both to be safe." Richard left them at the beach house and returned to the city. He called a press conference. Reporters filled the room, eager for details about his personal life. "Thank you all for coming. Richard began. "I'm here to address the rumors about my private life. Yes, I have been visiting a local diner regularly. The owner makes excellent coffee." A few people laughed. "I've made a new friend there, that's all. Now can we please focus on things that actually matter? My company just launched a new project that will bring clean water to villages in Africa. Let's talk about that instead." The press conference worked, at least partly. Some reporters moved on to other stories, but others kept digging. They found out about Lily's surgery. They discovered the connection to the Hayes Foundation. A week passed. Richard didn't visit Abby and Lily at the beach house, though he called every day to check on them. He wanted to give Abby the space she asked for. Then Greg came to his office, again looking serious. "Someone leaked information from inside the company," Greg said, "about the medical fund you set up for Lily." "Who would do that?" Richard asked. "I don't know. But there's more. A reporter found Laura's old school friend Claire. She told them about Laura's family song." Richard felt cold. "What exactly did she say?" "That you became obsessed with the song after Laura died. That you would play it over and over. And now you've found someone else who knows it." "That's not how it happened," Richard protested. "It doesn't matter," Greg said. "The story is out there now. Billionaire finds Waitress who sings dead wife's song." "They're making it sound creepy, Richard. Like you're trying to replace Laura with some woman because she knows the same song." Richard stood up, angry now. "That's not true. Abby is nothing like Laura. The song connected us, yes, but—" "Save it for someone who believes you," said a voice from the doorway. Richard turned to see Abby standing there, her face pale and hurt. "Abby," Richard said, "how did you—" "Your assistant let me in," she said. "I came to thank you for the beach house and to tell you we're going home. But I see now what this was all about." She held up her phone, showing a news article with the headline Greg had just mentioned. "Abby, please let me explain," Richard begged. "I heard enough," Abby said. "The song. It was always about the song, wasn't it? About Laura, not about me." Before Richard could answer, Abby turned and walked out. Richard ran after her, but by the time he reached the elevator, the doors had closed. She was gone. Richard tried calling Abby for days. She never answered. He went to the diner, but Joe told him she had quit. He sent flowers to her apartment, but they were returned. It was as if she had disappeared from his life completely. Richard felt empty, again. He had found something precious only to lose it because of a misunderstanding. He wanted to explain to Abby that yes, the song had brought them together, but what kept him coming back was her kindness, her strength, and the way she made him feel alive again. One evening, Richard sat alone in his large living room. The TV played a local news channel. He wasn't really watching until he heard the reporter say, "Melody's Place, the diner made famous by billionaire Richard Hayes, is closing its doors next week. The owner says rising rent has made it impossible to stay in business." Richard sat up straight. Melody's Place was closing? He picked up his phone and called Greg. "I need you to find out who owns the building where Melody's Place is located," Richard said. "And I need to know everything about Joe, the man who runs the diner." Greg sighed. "Richard, maybe it's time to let this go." "Just do it," Richard said. "Please." The next morning, Greg brought the information. The building was owned by a real estate company that was raising rents all over the city. Joe Wilson had run Melody's Place for 30 years, taking over from his father. The diner was named after Joe's mother. "I want to buy the building," Richard said. Greg shook his head. "This won't bring her back, you know." "This isn't about Abby," Richard insisted. "It's about doing the right thing. That diner means something to a lot of people." But Richard knew he wasn't being completely honest. He hoped that saving the diner might somehow lead him back to Abby. Richard's company bought the building, and he visited Melody's Place personally to tell Joe the good news. "The rent is going down, not up," Richard told the surprised cook. "And I'd like to help renovate the place. New equipment, fresh paint, whatever you need." Joe was suspicious. "Why would you do this?" "Because this place matters," Richard said. Simply. "To me, and to others?" Joe studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Abby's not coming back, you know. She took Lily and moved." Richard's heart sank. Where did they go? Joe hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Pine Haven. She went back to where her family came from, said she needed a fresh start. Pine Haven, the coastal town where both their families had roots. Richard thanked Joe and left, a plan already forming in his mind. The next day, Richard boarded his private jet. He had never been to Pine Haven before. As the small plane landed at the nearest airport, Richard felt nervous. What if Abby refused to see him? What if she had already moved on? Richard rented a car and drove to Pine Haven. It was a pretty town, by the sea, with old buildings and friendly faces. He stopped at a local cafe and asked about Abby Miller. "Oh, the music teacher," the cafe owner said. "She's fixing up the old Anderson place on River Road, turning it into a music school, I hear." Richard followed the directions to River Road. He found an old house with a fresh coat of white paint. A sign out front read, "Pine Haven Music School. Opening soon." Children's laughter came from inside. Richard parked and walked to the door. Through the window, he could see Abby sitting at a piano with Lily and several other children around her. She was smiling as she taught them to play, a simple tune. She looked happy here, in this place where her family story began. For a moment, Richard almost turned away. Maybe Abby was better off without him and all the complications he brought to her life. But then he heard it. The melody of their shared song played on the piano by Abby as the children listened. Richard knocked on the door. The music stopped. A moment later, Abby opened the door. When she saw Richard, her smile disappeared. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. "I needed to see you," Richard said. "To explain." Abby glanced back at the children. "This isn't a good time. I'm in the middle of a lesson. I'll wait," Richard said, "as long as it takes." Abby hesitated, then nodded. "There's a bench by the river behind the house. You can wait there." Richard walked to the river and sat on the wooden bench. From here, he could see the back of the music school and the wide, calm river beyond. He imagined Mary Miller and Laura's grandmother sitting by this same river, sharing a song that would connect their families across generations. An hour passed before Abby came out. She sat beside him on the bench, leaving space between them. "You found me," she said. "Joe told me. You came to Pine Haven." "I always wanted to come back here," Abby said. "After those news stories, it seemed like the right time." "How did you afford to open the music school?" Richard asked. Abby smiled slightly. "A lawyer contacted me. Said a client wanted to donate money to help start a music school in Pine Haven. The client wished to remain anonymous, but I'm guessing it was you." Richard nodded. "I wanted to help make your dream come true, even if you didn't want me in your life anymore." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the river flow. "I heard what you said to your friend that day," Abby finally said. "About me not being like Laura, about the song connecting us." "You didn't hear everything," Richard said. "Yes, the song brought us together. It was like Laura was leading me to you, to Lily, to a second chance at happiness." He turned to face her. "But Abby, I kept coming back because of you. Not because of a song, not because of the past, but because you made me feel alive again." Abby's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared," she admitted. "Of the attention, of the rumors, of not being enough for someone like you." "You are more than enough," Richard said. "You are exactly who I need." Abby moved closer on the bench. "I'm not Laura. I'll never be her." "I don't want you to be," Richard said. "Laura will always be part of my past. But I want you to be my future, if you'll give me another chance." Abby took his hand. "Lily asks about you, you know. She misses you." "I miss her too," Richard said. "And I miss you, Abby. More than I can say." From inside the house, they could hear piano music. Lily was playing their song, the notes floating out to them by the river. "The song has come home," Abby said softly. "Back to where it began." "What happens now?" Richard asked. Abby smiled. "Now we write our own verse of the song." She leaned forward and kissed him gently. Richard felt a weight lift from his heart. For 10 years, he had been frozen in time, unable to move forward. Now, beside this river, where their family's stories had first intertwined, he was finally free. 6 months later, Melody's place had a grand reopening. Joe proudly showed off the new kitchen and the fresh paint. Regular customers marveled at how the diner looked better, but still felt the same. In the corner booth sat Richard, Abby, and Lily. They were celebrating the success of the Pine Haven Music School, which now had 50 students. Richard had stepped back from daily management of his company, letting Greg take over as CEO while he focused on charity work and his new family. "Are you happy?" Abby asked him as they shared a piece of apple pie. Richard looked at Lily, who was coloring a picture of a river with 2 people sitting beside it. He looked at Abby, whose eyes held all the love he had thought he would never find again. "More than I ever thought possible," he answered truthfully. That night, as they stood on the porch of their home in Pine Haven, Richard and Abby sang the family song together. Their voices blended in perfect harmony, just as their lives had. The song that had once reminded Richard only of loss now filled him with hope for the future. And somewhere, Richard liked to think, Laura was smiling at the new family that had formed because of a melody passed down through generations, a song about love that lasts beyond time and finds its way home in the end.